Towards the end of the Mesozoic, in the Maastrichtian Era of the Late Cretaceous Period, a group of animals existed that were quite unlike anything alive today. Reinforced walls of skin, muscle, and armor, lined with tough plates, and armed with a flexible tail tipped with a massive club. These were the Ankylosaurs, the largest of which was Ankylosaurus, the subject of today's video. Ankylosaurus is one of the most instantly recognizable and most commonly reconstructed of all dinosaurs. And due to its unique shape and lifestyle, it has found its way into many books on paleontology and prehistoric life. What makes Ankylosaurus particularly interesting is the degree of preservation in some of the specimens that have been uncovered thus far. The remains of these dinosaurs tells us an awful lot about the lifestyle and potential behavior of Ankylosaurus, which is what we will be running through in today's video. We will look at how this dinosaur spent its days, what it ate, where it lived, and how it was discovered, among other things. Sit back and relax as we take you on a journey through time to uncover Ankylosaurus, the wandering fortress of a dinosaur. Educational videos like ours are a free and easy way to learn more about dinosaurs. There are other ways to access educational content about maths, data science, and even computer science. And that's through today's sponsor, Brilliant. Before we go further into today's video, I'd like to tell you more about Brilliant and how it's been helping me learn more about computer science. In particular, a course about search engines, something that we all use in our daily lives. It's fascinating to learn how search engines work and useful to apply to my job. We learn best when we're interacting with information, which Brilliant does by making every course and lesson fun and interactive. They also add new lessons every month and can customize the content to fit your skill level. Learning to understand how to build a search engine is useful to many people's careers. You might not need to build one, but if you understand how it works, then you can take advantage of that knowledge. It's not just that course. You can pick and choose from hundreds of courses to improve your skills, from basic to advanced, and learn to think as a real problem solver. Click on the link in the description to get started for free for 30 days and get 20% off the annual premium subscription by visiting brilliant.org/dinosaur discovery. Ankylosaurus, at its most basic level, was an ornithischian dinosaur, which sat in the Thyreophora clade, a grouping it shared with the plate-backed Stegosaurus and several basal thyreophorans, such as Scelidosaurus and the recently discovered Jacopil. Ankylosauridae, the family in which Ankylosaurus has been placed, is split into two distinct subfamilies, Ankylosaurinae and Nodosauridae. Our armored giant is, as you might expect, a member of the family Ankylosaurinae, a grouping which contained mainly larger, more heavily armored dinosaurs, who often possessed impressive and lethal weapons at the end of their tails. Only one species of Ankylosaurus is known to this day, Ankylosaurus magniventris, a dinosaur that was first named and described in 1908 by American paleontologist Barnum Brown. Ankylosaurus magniventris, whose name roughly translates into English as fused lizard with a great belly as a result of its armor and size, was likely the largest ankylosaur of all, proposed to have measured between 6 and 8 meters in length from its nose to the tip of its club tail. A weight of between 5 and 8 tons has also been put forward. A modern-day analog for such an animal might be the rhinoceros. While it lacks body armor, this bulky quadrupedal herbivore is immune to many predators due to its size and defensive horns. But a modern-day adult rhinoceros would have weighed and measured less than half that of an Ankylosaurus magniventris. Ankylosaurus was, in life, an incredibly bulkily built dinosaur with a broad barrel-shaped body. Its legs were comparatively short for an ornithischian, and the dinosaur's overall squat appearance and dome-shaped body would have added to the high degree of defense it could afford itself. Ankylosaurus's skull was also very broad, a rough triangle shape with 2 short horns jutting out from either side above the ears. Below these sat 2 smaller horns pointing backwards towards the wider body. Towards the mouth of the animal was a tough beak used for stripping vegetation from ferns and shrubs, which grew along the banks of rivers across the floodplains of North America. Further in the mouth, Ankylosaurus possessed rows of rather unique teeth. These teeth were leaf-shaped in form, compressed sideways. They were abnormally tall for a herbivore, but very small in stature. This structure and placement meant that Ankylosaurus could fit more teeth into its mouth for a more efficient manner of feeding. What was most striking about Ankylosaurus, as well as the other ankylosaurs, however, was the armor. This animal was covered in tough armor plates known as osteoderms. They lined the face and head, including the horns at the back of the skull. The regions around the nostrils and even the eyelids were armored to a degree. The armor continued along the neck, with arc-shaped curves of armor present in the form of rough lumps of bone. These osteoderms then lined the back in neat rows, where they increased in size towards the middle of the animal's torso. Selected osteoderms were present on the legs, but the underside was relatively soft. Along the tail, the armor grew thinner and the osteoderms smaller until they reached the tip of the tail. The tail was in fact composed of 2 massive osteoderms closely formed together, with a row of smaller ones lining the middle of the tail club. Only 1 club has been uncovered so far, but this measures 60 centimeters long by 49 centimeters wide by 19 centimeters tall. It is estimated that the individual this tail came from was not fully grown, and in reality it could have been even bigger. The tendons that held the tail together were ossified, strengthening it further, and allowed the dinosaur to swing the club from left to right. This club would have made Ankylosaurus one of the most dangerous animals in the late Cretaceous, and would have served as a weapon to smash into the hind limbs of large theropods. Given the weight and size of the club, as well as the strength of the muscles behind it, it's likely that the club would have been able to break bones, inflicting serious and permanent injury on any dinosaur unlucky enough to make contact with it when swinging in full force. all of the osteoderms on this dinosaur were covered in a layer of keratin, the same material that makes up human fingernails and the horns of rhinoceroses. Due to Ankylosaurus's size and form, it had few predators. It would have taken considerable coordination and effort to bring down a herbivore of this ilk. The expedition that would eventually result in the discovery of Ankylosaurus was made in 1906 by a man named Barnum Brown, an American paleontologist from Kansas. Brown is also credited with discovering the first specimens of Tyrannosaurus rex in the very same formation as Ankylosaurus. Hell Creek, near Gilbert Creek in Montana, USA. The expedition, funded by the American Museum of Natural History, saw the team unearth enough bones to get a good idea of what the dinosaur might have looked like in life. Amongst the remains collected from the expedition were the upper skull, 2 teeth, a series of ribs, part of the shoulder, and over 30 individual osteoderms that form the layers of armor on the dinosaur's back. Barnum Brown later named the individual, and Ankylosaurus was introduced to the world in his reports and papers from the expedition. The American Museum of Natural History took to the Scollard Formation by the Red Deer River in Alberta, Canada, a couple of years later in 1910. Barnum Brown led this expedition too, and it once again proved fruitful. It was then that Brown uncovered the aforementioned tail with attached club, revolutionizing what we knew about this dinosaur and its immediate relatives. On top of this, a complete skull was found this time, as well as previously undiscovered ribs, vertebrae, and bones of both forelimbs and hindlimbs. That was all that was known of the dinosaur until 1947, when American fossil hunters Charles M. Sternberg and T. Potter Chamney uncovered another complete skull, with an additional lower jawbone, in the immediate vicinity of Barnum's second discovery. This skull was much larger than the previous specimen, indicating that Barnum's dinosaurs were not fully grown, but it was in poorer condition than previous specimens. A vertebral segment was later discovered in the 1960s in Hell Creek, and over the following years, scattered teeth and osteoderms have been uncovered by a variety of paleontologists and fossil hunters. Over the years, the finer details of the science surrounding Ankylosaurus have come under scrutiny and debate. Many of the known specimens of Ankylosaurus have not been described in great detail, primarily due to the incomplete nature of the skeletons and the time they were unearthed. Ankylosaurus was, without a doubt, one of the most spectacular animals ever to have evolved on planet Earth. How then did a creature like this manage to appear on the scene back in the late Cretaceous? The answer can be traced to the research undertaken by Victoria Arbour, a postdoctoral researcher from the North Carolina Museum of Sciences. When Arbour began studying ankylosaurs, she focused on the tail of Ankylosaurus, which is made up of 2 structures, known as a handle and a knob. The knob is where the osteoderms lie, whereas the handle is the piece of vertebral tail supporting it. While the tail was flexible, in the sense that the whole thing could move from left to right. The dinosaur could not move individual vertebrae. As such, Arbour looked at earlier ankylosaurs, namely Liaoningosaurus, Gobisaurus, and Panacosaurus, to explore different evolutionary routes. Victoria Arbour had managed to narrow down the tail's evolution to 3 distinct paths, based on the other dinosaurs she had studied. Either the knob evolved first, while the tail remained flexible. The handle evolved first, with the earliest Ankylosaurus possessing overlapping tail osteoderms. Or both structures evolved at the same time, where there would have been a wide variation in the sizes of knobs and handles. By the early Cretaceous, ankylosaurs were evolving inflexible tails, with the vertebrae locked together. It looked as though Arbour's second theory was correct. Ankylosaurus with knobbed tails only began to appear at the very end of the Cretaceous. Ankylosaurs developed their armor and tail clubs in response to the evolution of larger predators in the region in which they lived. All Thyreophora dinosaurs are descended from a stock of small ornithischians, who would have co-inhabited the floodplains of the Jurassic with equally small theropod predators. As the theropods evolved a larger size and strength to exploit the growing abundance in food sources, the Thyreophorans needed to evolve to protect themselves. As such, some of them branched out into the stegosaurs, lumbering herbivores with plates on their backs and spikes on their tails. Others took a more defensive stance, becoming the ankylosaurs, both the nodosaurids and the ankylosaurids. In order to protect themselves against the sharp teeth and gnashing jaws of large theropods, the skin on the ankylosaurus' backs ossified into hardened bone and keratin, creating an almost impermeable wall of defense against nature's toughest weapons. As if the defense wasn't already enough, some ankylosaurs would have gone on the offensive with their clubs, making them an extremely difficult target for even the most well-equipped theropod. While nothing quite like an ankylosaurus exists in the 21st century, it is not the only animal to have exploited this ecological niche and body plan throughout the annals of prehistory. In the Pleistocene epoch of the Cenozoic, roughly around the same time our early ancestors were beginning to spread across the globe, ancient relatives of the modern armadillo existed on the plains of South America. These huge mammals, known as glyptodonts, were uncannily similar to the ankylosaurids. Short legs, long tails equipped with spikes or clubs, with large bodies entombed in spectacular shells to keep the bearer safe from harm, all fed into the similarities. These animals lived in grasslands and plains in what would one day become the dramatic landscapes of Brazil and Argentina, and would have used their weaponry to defend themselves from terror birds or saber-toothed cats. This is possible through a process known as convergent evolution. This takes place when two unrelated animal groups evolve the same basic body plan and adaptations to tackle a similar environment or food source. Many examples can be found across the world today. Pangolins and anteaters are very similar to one another, yet are in no way related and are not found in the same areas. Modern whales and dolphins share almost the exact same body plan as some of the Mesozoic ichthyosaurs that thrived in the seas during the time of the dinosaurs. While bats appeared in the sky long after birds and pterosaurs had developed powered flight with a vertebrate body plan. Ankylosaurus was one of many species of iconic dinosaur, native to the Hell Creek Formation in the Maastrichtian stage of the Late Cretaceous, the very last section of the Mesozoic, before the dinosaurs and other giant reptiles of the world came crashing down into extinction. Ankylosaurus is known primarily from Montana, but subsequent specimens were unearthed across various points in Wyoming. The dinosaurs' range extends north into Canada, with sparse discoveries made across parts of Alberta and Saskatchewan. Due to the fact that Ankylosaurus fossils are only occasionally uncovered, paleontologists have reason to believe that in life the dinosaur was rare, possibly traveling alone. Another reason for the scarcity of the dinosaur in the fossil record was that it may have preferred environments of high altitude, perhaps up in the hills or mountains of the Hell Creek Formation. This would have meant that the dinosaur was less likely to fossilize, as there would have been little sediment to cover the animal upon its death. However, it is possible that Ankylosaurus would not have been entirely restricted to the uplands. The environments of Hell Creek were diverse. Towards the hills thrived rich woodlands and rocky areas, whereas down near the coast of the Western Interior Seaway that cut through much of North America, coastal lowlands, cliffs, marshes, and floodplains were prevalent. Rich sandstones and mudstones made up the sediment of these regions, which is where the dinosaurs' fossils have been found, and help scientists understand more about what the environment was like. The weather was warm, and rain was common, and the subtropical climate led to frequent natural disasters, which would have wrought forest fires across the land. The plant content of Ankylosaurus's domain was rich and diverse. Early flowering plants may have formed meadows across the rolling highlands and mountain faces, and conifer forests towered high above ground level. Ferns and cycads littered the forest floor, which would have been interrupted by streams and rivers cutting through the land, all feeding into the Western Interior Seaway. Several other iconic and universally known dinosaurs shared the land with Ankylosaurus from a wide number of families and clades. The dome-headed Pachycephalosaurus would have been a common sight up on the mountainsides and hilltops, and potentially vast herds of Triceratops and Torosaurus, the rhinoceros-like frilled ceratopsians, stretched out across the floodplains. The tyrant lizard king himself, Tyrannosaurus rex, was the largest and most powerful predator of the region. One of the only dinosaurs capable of sparring with an adult Ankylosaurus and coming out victorious. Other theropods included the ornithomimosaurs, Struthiomimus and Ornithomimus, whereas elsewhere in Hell Creek, the large Dromaeosaur Dakotaraptor was thriving. It was a vast and unique expanse of land, filled with some of the most awe-inspiring animals ever to walk the earth. Ankylosaurus was just one piece of the puzzle. Ankylosaurus was not a particularly tall dinosaur. and with its inflexible neck and short stature, would have only been able to exploit food sources low to the ground. This was not a problem for our armored giant, and up in the higher altitudes of Hell Creek, it would have been met with little competition for the abundant food sources growing along the mountainsides and hill crests. Cycads and ferns would have been a favorite meal for these bulky herbivores, who, with their tough beaks and many leaf-shaped teeth, would have been able to easily strip vegetation from branches and stalks. While Ankylosaurus filled a similar niche to modern-day giant herbivores that might live out in the grasslands and plains of present-day Africa, its lifestyle is not thought to have been comparable to them. Modern-day elephants, for example, are famed for their role as ecosystem engineers, animals that are able to change the land around them to help them survive. African bush and forest elephants will knock over entire trees in order to strip bark from them to eat. Ankylosaurus, despite its strength, was not thought to have been able to knock over trees due to its low center of gravity. Additionally, it would not have found bark easy to consume. Its tiny teeth, as well as the structures of its beak, meant that this was a dinosaur equipped to strip and consume soft plant matter, not rough bark. While Ankylosaurus did have predators, it would not have been easy to take one down. Tyrannosaurus was likely the only dinosaur of Hell Creek capable of doing so, and it would not have taken much for the herbivorous tank to smash one of its leg bones with its tail club. Tyrannosaurus had an immense bite force, able to chomp down with between 8 to 14,000 pounds of force with its huge jaws and dagger-like teeth. While Ankylosaurus was well placed to break a bone or deflect an attack, Tyrannosaurus could have scored a quick victory if it could land a bite on the herbivore's neck, or flip it over to get to the softer underside. It is likely that, on occasion, fights between the two species would have lasted a long time, with each dinosaur having to time its attack perfectly in order to get the upper hand. One wrong move could have meant a death sentence for either party. We also cannot rule out that Ankylosaurus may have used its impressive weaponry for battling it out with conspecifics, for the right to a certain stretch of territory, or the right to mate with a female. Such battles could have been both lethal and awe-inspiring, as giant males exchanged blows in the forests and hills of Hell Creek, slamming their huge clubs into the flanks of the opposition, with likely devastating consequences for the losing combatant. Such fights have been observed amongst hoofed mammals in modern times, with creatures such as bighorn sheep and musk oxen smashing their horns together in a violent, unsettling display of force. Ankylosaurus, like all of its contemporaries in the Maastrichtian Age of the Cretaceous Period, had their world literally come crashing down when the Chicxulub asteroid impact spelled out fiery, ash-covered doom for all non-avian dinosaurs left on Earth 66 million years ago. The sky went dark with clouds of thick ash. Meteors rained down on the sky, and thick clouds of smoke choked millions upon millions of organisms. While anything in the immediate vicinity of the asteroid was fried instantly, it took the best part of a year for the extinction event to wipe out the rest of its victims, and it was a slow, painful demise for many of the species involved. Ankylosaurus, in the absence of the plant matter that would have been burned up or blanketed in ash by the impact, would have been one of the first to go. Once the plant matter of the land was rendered inedible, all of the herbivores would have died out. Once the corpses of the herbivores had been consumed or rotted, the larger carnivores were left without food, and they too went extinct. By the end of the End Cretaceous extinction event, nearly 3/4 of all organisms on Earth were gone. Ankylosaurus, along with every other non-avian dinosaur, was extinct. Gone, too, were the great reptiles of the sea, the mosasaurs and the plesiosaurs, and the amazing reptiles of the air, the pterosaurs. In their place grew new life, the mammals. Poised to take over the Cenozoic, the little mammals that had once lived in the shadows of giants were the inheritors of the new warming land. When the ash cleared and the plant life regained its foothold on the globe, a plethora of new creatures crawled, fluttered, swung, and ran across the forests and plains of a world where giants once roamed. Due to its unique and impressive form, it is easy to see why Ankylosaurus is such a popular and well-documented dinosaur across both popular and niche media. However, the famous dinosaur's appearance has not always been well understood. When the dinosaur was first discovered, it was not known that it possessed the iconic clubbed tail. As such, early depictions of Ankylosaurus show it without the feature. Moreover, the dinosaur is usually shown dragging its tail along the floor as it walked or stood, something that has happened to many large ornithischians in the past, such as Stegosaurus and Triceratops, before paleontologists understood the true form of these animals, with their tails held out horizontally behind them. Many depictions of Ankylosaurus also show the dinosaur with large, pointed spikes jutting out in rows along its flanks. While this was present in many notosaurid ankylosaur, such as Edmontonia or Notosaurus, they were entirely absent on Ankylosaurus and its immediate relatives. Armor was present on the animal's flank, sure, but in the form of tough, domed osteoderms, rather than sharp, jutting spikes. Conversely, some notosaurs have previously been depicted with clubbed tails, whereas this was a specialty unique to Ankylosaurus and the later, larger ankylosaurid dinosaurs. Early depictions of the dinosaur also showed it with a heavily domed, curved back, something that in reality was non-existent. Ankylosaurus instead held its body entirely horizontally. The head, neck, back, and tail were just about even with one another, and the 4 short legs held the body low to the ground, rather than high up. It is unsurprising then that Ankylosaurus has found its way into many different dinosaur books, films, television shows, and other media. It is a popular subject to be painted by paleo artists, both professional and hobbyist, due to its interesting shape and popularity. As the years go by, these depictions are getting more and more accurate in the face of modern science, and the dinosaur has often been depicted ambling around the uplands of Cretaceous Montana peacefully, rather than locked in combat with Tyrannosaurus like many old recreations. it would be nearly impossible to find a dinosaur book, fact or fiction, that does not mention Ankylosaurus, or at least the wider Ankylosaur group, referring to them as armored tanks, explaining the use of its awesome tail. As is the case with many popular or well-known dinosaurs, Ankylosaurus has previously found itself at the mercy of the Jurassic World franchise. It is shown throughout the film franchise, both sparring with conspecifics and predators, as well as fleeing from a volcanic eruption in the second installment, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. The dinosaurs in the film series suffer the same inaccuracies with the osteoderms and armor. Ankylosaurus in Jurassic World is completely lacking in domed, rounded armor, and instead is coated in rows and rows of sharp spikes. This fits with the general trend of the films altering the appearance of the dinosaurs to make them more aggressive-looking or movie monster-like. Moreover, the film's dinosaurs' legs are longer than the actual animal and more splayed out to the side like a lizard. Finally, it is shown on numerous occasions to be running away from danger. Something that, given the weight of the animal, length of its legs, and overall stature, would be impossible. In life, Ankylosaurus could probably only manage a brisk trot at its top speed. We do, however, appear to be in something of a second dinosaur renaissance. Our understanding about these amazing animals is changing, and it is becoming more and more common to see up-to-date depictions of popular dinosaurs in the media, with new shows such as Prehistoric Planet broadcasting these animals for what they really were. Who knows how the public's perception of these extinct reptiles may change in the times to come. A little over 20 different genera of Ankylosaurid dinosaur exist within the family Ankylosauridae. The earliest of these animals appeared on the scene just over 135 million years ago, whereas the last of them disappeared when the asteroid struck 66 million years ago. Most dinosaurs in the family were large, and all were heavily armored, with the classic leaf-shaped teeth shown in Ankylosaurus. The osteoderms on the dinosaur's skin were all rounded and domed, and many of them possessed club-like weaponry at the end of the tail. Ankylosaurs existed in sparse populations across North America, Europe, and Asia, restricted mainly to the northern hemisphere. Ankylosaurus's closest relative was the very similar Anodontosaurus, known from the Canyon Formation in Alberta. Discovered in 1928, its name translates to toothless lizard in English from ancient Greek. This was due to compression damage within the fossil sediment, removing the teeth from the known specimen. The dinosaur would have resembled Ankylosaurus very closely. It was a 5-meter-long squat herbivore, with a large tail club and tough osteoderms. Also very closely related, and perhaps the second most well-known dinosaur of the family, was Euplocephalus, another Canadian relative. So similar, in fact, are some of these dinosaurs to one another, that scientists have spent considerable time trying to prove that specimens of Ankylosaurus, Ankylosaurus, and Euplocephalus are in fact members of their own distinct genera, and not all the same. Amongst the other famous dinosaurs within the Ankylosauridae family were Cychania, a smaller animal from Mongolia with conical-shaped osteoderms. Panacosaurus, a Chinese ankylosaur, which was much more lightly built than its contemporaries. And Gobisaurus, a basal ankylosaur known from the Gobi Desert. The family was also composed of several specimens that defy everything we supposedly know about Ankylosaurids, including the bizarre Liaoningosaurus from China's Liaoning province. This tiny ankylosaur possessed much more basic armor than its cousins, and is thought to have lived in and around rivers, diving after fish for its food in the subtropical forests of the Yixiang Formation. It sounds stranger than fiction when you consider that its closest relatives are giant lumbering creatures that fed on ferns and cycads, but it's completely real. Ankylosaurus was just one of several amazing creatures that inhabited the Earth towards the end of the Cretaceous period. By the time the dinosaurs were present on the scene, its contemporaries had branched out into all sorts of amazing animals, whose lineages were tragically cut short by the impending doom zeroing in on them from the sky. Ankylosaurus, despite its apparent familiarity with those of us who know about dinosaurs, is a seriously strange animal. Its defenses were amongst the best of any vertebrate that has ever evolved. Its weaponry was able to put down one of the most powerful animals ever to live. And its overall shape and form is like nothing alive today. How much of a shame it is, then, that such an animal is lost to the annals of time. Perhaps with future excavations and discoveries, we will come to know even more about this amazing dinosaur, and an even clearer picture of what it looked like and how it lived will be unlocked to science.